Hello, friends, and welcome to Service of Change's Changecast, your podcast for change. I'm your host, Dennis Nappy II, with Service of Change, where small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. Lots going on in the world tonight as we host this Changecast. There's been several interesting events. We're going to speak about one of them tonight. The topic of our show is Armageddon and the Apocalypse. Can it really happen, or are they stories just to scare us or teach us a lesson? But before I do that, let me bring on my esteemed co-host. It's been confirmed by another listener. He is, in fact, the philosopher of Facebook, Joel the Provocateur Schaefer. What's going on, dude?
Hey, Dennis. It's wonderful to be online with you and just to spend time with you in general.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah.
It's been we missed a week last week. I got an opportunity to go down the beach with the kids, and it's tough when you're in summer mode, trying to take advantage of every opportunity. And so we shot down there. And interesting story. I'm going to jump into it real quick, if you don't mind, Joel.
Sure.
I am a shark attack survivor.
Wow.
Let me tell you now. You may feel differently after I tell you my story, but that's what my wife rolls her eyes whenever I say that. We were down at Long Beach Island with some friends. And I'm standing in the water. We walked out, waited. You know how sometimes the water will dip down real deep, and it comes up on like a little sandbar.
Sure.
So we're up on the sandbar. It's about maybe waist deep, and I've got my daughter in my arms. My wife's holding my son. She's next to me, and about 10 feet out from us is this older guy just floating on his back. To the right of him, dude, a shark jumps out of the water. I guess it grabbed a fish. You saw like mouth, dorsal fin, tail, and then it just disappeared. And my eyes just bulged out of my head. I just kind of froze for a minute. I looked at my wife. It's like, was that a shark? And then the lifeguards start blowing the whistle and calling us in. We're the only ones in the water. So we go, out of the water. The old man comes just casually walking in. He was a boss, dude. And I go up to the lifeguard and I said, was that what I think it was? Was that a shark? And he was a young kid. I don't even think he was 20. And he's like, I think it was it could have been a dolphin. I'm like, bro. Look, it didn't come up beforehand. It hasn't come up since. There's no other dolphins around. That's not how dolphins, swim in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting there. He's quiet. He's like, I don't know. It could have been, And then the other guy who was working with him comes up. He's like, sir, we're not allowed to say shark. I said, are you kidding me? I said, is this politics and business just like in Jaws? And he's like, pretty much.
Wow.
So they never notified the other beachgoers that, like there are people – I guess 200 yards down the ocean, there are people in the water at the other lifeguard tower. I don't think they notified them or anything. Nobody got out of the water. So it was very anticlimactic for me. I thought that they would clear the beach if they had a shark sighting. So I'm thinking maybe this is just so common and they're always there and, they rarely bother people. I don't know. But with here I am believing the hype. You see all the shark attack headlines on the news this summer. So I'm thinking it should have been more of a big deal, and it wasn't. Nobody really said anything about it.
I think I'd have to look into it more, but I do think that there's been more sharks far north in this part of the world, on the Atlantic Ocean, eastern seaboard, than there has been in the past.
Yes.
That's my hypothesis.
I'm speaking strictly on rumors right now. That's rumors intelligence, but I've heard something to do with the temperature changes with the Gulf Stream or one of the currents in there, or something with the food supply has shifted too, driving inward. So I've heard one of those two things, but again, completely unconfirmed. But I know I heard it somewhere from a guy, from a friend, from a cousin who knew somebody. You know how that goes. But at least I have the courage to admit that that's where I heard it from. I'm not gonna sit down.
Yeah.
But so it was interesting.
At your own peril, basically.
Oh, yeah, man. Dude, I'll tell you, I always tell people I'm afraid of sharks in the ocean. And my wife teases me, and I'm like, I'm not going to the shark. She's like, you're never going to see a shark. There's never going to be a shark attack. You worry too much. And now right there in front of us, there was a shark. But just to kind of face my fear, within a half hour after the sighting, dude, I went back in.
There you go.
And I just stood there and stared down the shark in case he came back. He never showed up. He must know him from Upper Darby. That's what's up.
Well, you'd be surprised. Some animals will back down if you put out that energy. Now, if you don't want to put out threatening energy, you put out strength. Sometimes animals will. They're like, oh, I'll move on to a An easier target. Yeah, softer target.
I was putting out strength, but it's a hypothesis I don't want to test with the shark.
That's true.
Although I think I kind of did, but I'm not going to do it again.
Listen, I love the ocean so much that I would have to make that calculation, that risk calculation, that I'm not going to allow it to alter my. I mean, I still, if I see something, I'll get out, but I'm not going to not go into the water because there's more shark sightings when I finally go to the shore later on this month.
You know, and it's tough, isn't that, with everything? You know, I thought about this a lot when I was down there, not just from the shark attack, but there's so much to be afraid of in this world that, and it's easy for me to fall in this trap. And I'm always promoting, don't be afraid, face your fear, or at least be caught, you know, whatever. Don't let your fears rule your life. But in a lot of ways, they tend to start doing that in my life, where to the point where I just want to shut myself in my home 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to find that balance and take a quote unquote calculated risk. You know, otherwise you miss out on life.
Exactly.
And when I was down there on the beach, I forgot about everything. And you know, and I talked about this in the morning show that I do. It's like, is all this stuff, and like just sitting there looking at the ocean and playing with my kids, I'm sitting there going, all right, everything that I talk about, everything that I write about, maybe I'm just nuts, because right now life is good. Everything's nice, you know? Nobody's getting murdered, nobody's getting robbed, there's nothing, you know, craziness in the world. And it's really, I really struggle with, oh my gosh, is this really happening, or is it in my head? And wish that sometimes I could just shut it off and live in that bubble of ignorance. I talked to our friend, you know, Ray Davis, about that. Actually, he gave some really encouraging advice about that. You know, he's like, you can't forget. Once you know this stuff, you can't really turn a blind eye. You'll never unsee it. But it's tough, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an art of, see, how do I explain it? It's like we can deny that there's stuff going on. We can like suppress the fear, but there's also, it's not either suppress it or not suppress it. There might be a third way where we can bring some kind of whatever it is that our belief system is, bring that with us into these moments where we can have the fear there but not have it rule us. And I think you already do that in most of the things you do.
That's a good point, and it is. I try to, you know, focus on what I hold to be true based on my experience.
Exactly.
You know, and it's the same thing as somebody who is very religious and they pray when they're afraid or dealing with something. It gives them comfort and it gives them strength. And really, I think what that is I think that's the right word, a talisman, right? Is that the right word? Just an icon they can hold on to that they think brings them luck. Because what I've studied and what I've come across with the study, you know, consciousness studies and stuff, is that it's our intent that can manifest our reality and can create our reality. So when you have that belief that this prayer works, well, it does, you know, because it's not necessarily the words that you're saying or the God that you're praying to. It's your belief and your conscious intent that those words are going to work. And that's where, you know, so when you can hold on to your beliefs in those situations, that can, I think, make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
But I digress.
No, I think you're bringing, in those moments, people bring out the life force, their own life force, which is the most powerful thing there is. I mean, you bring it out, and there's more than one way to bring it out. But but those ways definitely do bring it out often, even though sometimes they have problems. You know, there's problems with saying that that's the only way it can be brought out, is saying these specific words or something. You know,
exactly, and that's where dogma comes in.
Exactly,
you know, certain aspects of religion come in. But I think that understanding the power of that, or the mechanism of prayer or meditation, you know, I think it warrants. I don't want to use the word scientific because that word is almost tainted nowadays.
Right,
a lot of people who don't trust. I mean, I just came across an article, a study out of I want to say the University of Michigan. I might be misquoting it. I talked about it on my morning show, where they found that just about all publications, scientific publications, can be traced back to 6 corporations that have. So everything that's published is being filtered through just 6 agencies for the most part. That's scary because it said just about every one of these agencies has some kind of interest in pharmaceuticals and vaccinations as well. So it really makes you wonder about a lot of this stuff, which is a topic I don't even want to touch right now. But
Right.
I'm always challenging people. When I worked in Intel, it was, well, verify your source. Who's your source? What's their motive? Why are they giving you this information? What do they want? What do they get out of this? And it's the same thing. Just because it's science doesn't always mean it's the best science.
Exactly.
I was just go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's a perfect segue. I know we wanted to talk about one of the events going on, current events, but I think it at least can foreshadow the topic of tonight's show in the sense that we were going to talk about apocalypses and Armageddons.
Yes.
And I think, I had that one Facebook post about mythology, and mythology is a story. And so you were saying this phenomenon warrants, and you were trying to look for a word, it warrants a story. It warrants the investigation that goes, thinking, narrative. I mean, science isn't the only way to, because even in science you have to translate that into a narrative, because you have information that the science gives you, but then what do you do with it? You still are telling a story. Well, what are we going to do? We measured all these variables. Well, what now? Well, now that we have the knowledge, you have to be able to tell a story that makes sense, and that's what we're trying to do here at Service of Change is tell meaningful stories.
What are you going to do with that knowledge? And you got to use it, put it in a pack. Like same thing with intelligence.
Yeah.
You got to put it into a package that's usable.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Yeah.
That's not always easy to do, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name right now. I spoke about it on one of my other shows that they basically concluded. He says if you accept, he's talking about string theory, and he basically uncovered code. I'm digressing a little bit, but he uncovered code that was binary code, not like binary code, but it was binary code. And this guy basically, he concluded at the end, he said, what's been challenging for me to accept is that we are actually living in the Matrix, that we're living in basically a digital universe. It was a fascinating thing. He was on a panel with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who was interviewing him. What the heck's his name? I'm going to look through my notes, see if I can find it. But, what he said, and here's the whole reason I bring this up. He says, I don't have a popular journal article. He said there was one written, but it's not too detailed. He says everything written about this is in science gobbledygook, and he says that's a technical term. So he didn't have a way to really convey that yet to the people that's in a product that's manageable for guys like you and me who don't speak physics.
Right.
And I think that's what, like you said, what we try to do with Service of Change is take our little bit of knowledge and experience and put it into words and stories that are understandable for everybody, so everybody can take away from it and use that information.
Yeah, and then come back to us.
Yes.
With what did it work? What did it mean for you? And that's what I respect about you, and that's what I will say about myself. Not to sound overconfident, but I think one of the things I'm proud of as a human being is that I'm always willing to add to this story. Like life is an ongoing story. So I'm not I refuse to settle on just one account. If there's new information that comes along, I'm not going to abandon my account either. Like I will fight for what I believe to a point, but I'm going to supplement what I know and then what I repeat with what other people offer. So it's going to be a collaborative effort to continue to try to make sense of what this is we're dealing with, life in the world. Even
if it refutes what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're one that will say, hey, and we've both done this.
Yeah.
I was wrong. Yeah. Here's the correction of it, because, well, our credibility matters,
Yeah.
I
don't want to just be right. That's like, it's funny, maybe this is an aside, but like when I was younger, me and my friends would play cards or even play sports or something, and there would be people that would cheat. And I always was like, what thrill is there in cheating? Like knowing you didn't really win. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's an analogy to people that just want to be right for the sake of being right. Like there's a thrill there. Like I don't want to be right just for the sake of being right. Like I want like results for my life and other people's lives. Like I want it to work. I want it to mean something. I don't want to just be like, I'm right. Everybody like, throw roses at my feet as I walk by. Like,
but I think that is because you're less materialistic. Like somebody that cheats a lot of times are doing it to gain something, or they're doing it for the thrill of not getting caught. I mean, I've cheated playing Monopoly before, and the fun of it was, is anybody going to catch me? I didn't care if I won the game. I cared that, hey, I'm stealing your money every time you look away, and I want to see if you're going to notice that I took $500 from you.
That makes sense. I mean, that's relatively harmless in the scale of things, but
but somebody else might cheat the system, because they want to get ahead, or they're fed up with the system and they're trying to get around it. So I think there are times to cheat, times when cheating is acceptable on a moral scale, because maybe you're within a corrupt system, and straight out is just not a good calculated risk. But to cheat it might be a better risk for you, where you still can do what you should be doing, or do what is right.
Well, so, I think it's more. Maybe I didn't quite say it right. It's more that there's a lot of people that, so when they make statements about the world, often it appears as if they're trying to be helpful, or they're trying to be wise.
Right.
And so if those people's intention is simply to get accolades or approval from other people, then that's really not what they set out. That wasn't implied in what, because they phrased it as if they were trying to help people. They were trying to teach people something. You know what I mean? But instead, it seems like they got a separate agenda. So maybe that's where the analogy was, where if you're playing a game and the goal is to win and to show off your talent, but you have a separate agenda, then there's the dishonesty there, I would say, sometimes. And I think that's what I was getting at, is that I think that I actually, when I say that I want to learn and teach, I think it's safe to say, now I'm human, so there's always exceptions to this, but like I fall short, but I think it's safe to say that if that's how I come across, that's actually my intention. So being wrong isn't a bad thing in that, because being wrong is going to help me be better at that.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that today, is people's intentions and what people are doing. I can actually tie this into our Armageddon show tonight, because I was thinking, like, at the end of if the apocalypse were to happen, how would we govern ourselves? Because our political system's so broken right now. What would we do different? And my thought was, well, I think, and I feel like one of those guys in a think tank who's like, I think this would work, and nothing ever works on TV. That's my go-to right now. But nothing ever works, because man is a fallible creature. But I was thinking of a model in my head of, and being human, I don't know how possible it is, but just of pure transparency. I think, if you are completely open and honest about what you're doing, what your decisions are, and why you're doing it, if you're in a leadership role and you're making, and I think that people should be entitled to that. Your elected officials should be 100% transparent about everything.
Yes.
I think that would minimize a lot of the mistrust, a lot of the problems, and everything that's going on. I had a point that I was going to tie into something else that you said, and I think I just lost it. What were you talking about? You're talking about your intent to teach.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm thinking back to when I worked in intelligence. One of the problems we had every so often, we'd be looking into this, looking into that, and hoping to find this type of information. Nothing. And then we'd have the briefing where the general's showing up, and some superstar would stand up, and he just happened to have that key golden piece of information that we knew the general was going to love. And we'd always be like, why didn't you share that with us 5 hours ago? That would have helped everybody out, because they got the hero syndrome. They want to be the ones to present that, to cry wolf, and that's tough. When you come across information, it's one thing if you're sitting on it because, well, I haven't verified this yet and I'm still looking into it, but you do have those people who, they just like the attention of, I uncovered this, And I got to admit, it's neat being the first one to something, or the one to make those connections, but it's also very dangerous to do that. So it's a tough game when you're involved, even with what we do. Although we don't have a ton of listeners at this point, if that one person listens and is misled by us, well, they could who knows what they could go out and do? You know, I mean, you never know what power you have. What you say resonates with somebody. So I try to always choose my words carefully, and if I don't know it, I try to make that clear. You know, hey, this isn't verified. You know,
Yeah,
it can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I think there's a sacredness to the idea of I don't want to set myself up as some kind of great wise man or something, but I think I'm an apprentice at truth seeking, like your other YouTube channel. Like I'm an apprentice. You know, hopefully I get the journeyman status before I die. But
you and me both, brother.
But it's a sacred thing. I mean, it's it's important. It's a calling. It's special, and it's like just to tarnish that. I don't know. It's like anything where somebody comes along and just tarnishes what you're doing and just doesn't take it seriously. Like it can be offensive sometimes.
It's offensive, and it's one of the biggest challenges that we deal with, Joel, in this truth-seeking journey that we're on, because there are people out there who just put out garbage. Some,
Yes.
you know, and there's a whole realm of conspiracy theories as to who they are and why they're doing it. Some people just like to create conflict. You know, some people, they say, are out there intentionally putting out disinformation to throw us off the path. Some people are just flat wrong, flat off the rocker.
Yeah.
And some people don't know what they're talking about. But there's a lot of bad information out there. And then what happens is you'll get one piece of bad information that sounds really great, and then people start to quote it, you know, and nobody ever finds the original source. And I've been guilty of this from time to time. I get caught up in stuff, but like a big one was a lot of people were talking about fluoride in the water, and they were saying the Nazis put it in the water to, you know, to dumb down the Jewish population before they started their genocide. And now here I am again. I can't remember the source, but I did come across a verifiable source where like, yo, that didn't happen. You know, and that was one of the biggest arguments against fluoridation in the water. Now, I still think that's a bad thing, but the Nazi argument, from what I understand, was no good. But that's frustrating because now every piece of information I look at, I got to say, well, how can I get behind this now? So my rule of thumb is try to find 3 sources that claim the same thing, you know?
I mean, I think it's an instant gratification issue, too. I mean,
yeah.
People are acclimated to getting things very easily, very cheaply, and getting their feel goods and their payoffs very quickly. So I think sometimes it's natural. I think often people just believe their own hype. Like I listen to people, and I don't think they're being insincere, but it's just like they've gotten something, but it's not enough yet. Like they're on the right track, but it's not enough yet, and they're like they think they've arrived. They got into the destination. And I'm like, no, you need to do a little more. Do a little more. It's harder than that. It's not so easy just to, you know, suddenly get online and be like, it's the new world order.
you watch.
Even though what they're saying, like you see it, there's centralized control. I don't want to get too far on that, but there's definitely an agenda, with a lot of powerful people in countries that they want to control, and they are controlling things, but it's more complicated than that.
Let me tell you, I'm 20 years into this inquiry, and although I have an understanding, I still feel like I don't know anything, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm finally at a point where I can roughly articulate it into words. Before I just knew something is off, and I didn't know how to explain it. Now I have a story to tell that goes with it, where I try to prove my point. Hopefully, when I'm done writing my next book, I can better explain it. Once my thoughts will be clear, but it takes time to really delve into this and put the pieces together and understand it, synthesize it, apply it. All these other things that you have to do with it. It's one thing to just spit out the story. It's another thing to understand how it ties in, how it relates, what it means, and how to use it. And that's important. Why have this information? Well, we should be able to use it somehow. Graham Hancock just had a post yesterday. He's an archaeologist and a researcher and a very, very talented author. I recommend any of his books. The supernatural stuff that I talk about, he nails it. He explains it where you're like, wow, there's no doubt. Yes, he figured this stuff out. Well, he is claiming that, they just released, it's on the Truth Seekers Facebook page, but an article just came out, a study that was just concluded, an official study that showed that there was a cataclysmic event that caused mass destruction and extinction on the planet Earth, some 12,800 years ago. They narrowed it down within a span of 100 years. And he's calling this the smoking gun because, that there was this advanced civilization in the past that was completely wiped out, although we refuse to admit that, hey, there was an advanced civilization, prior to us. We keep thinking we're the first great society here on Earth, and
Yes.
that's not the case. So I'm looking forward to his new book, Magicians of the Gods. I'm sure he's going to easily back up everything that he says and claims, and it should change our approach to understanding who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. But we'll see what the mainstream does to discredit that or to just deny it and shut it down. But it's getting harder and harder with researchers like him coming forward with that stuff.
Well, that's exactly. Yeah, that's. I was just gonna. No, you just took the words out of my mouth. That's what we set out to talk about.
And I don't know. Should we jump into that? I know you wanted to talk about the other police incident too. You want to?
Let's jump into I think we'll run out of time. Let's jump into the police things isn't going away, so we can talk about it another night.
We'll talk about that another evening. But so getting back to to this, I've come across things for years now about these ancient societies. I mean, people hear stories of Atlantis. People hear stories of now Lemuria, Mu, Oceania. All these ancient cultures that have allegedly existed, but and were these advanced societies, but are now wiped off from the earth. And there's all these stories that go with it. What is it? They're aliens. They were an advanced species of humans on the earth. All these different things have come about it. They were a hybrid race. I mean, I've read a lot of these different stories. Are they just stories? I mean, there's reference in Genesis to other societies, other civilizations, and other creatures on the earth as well. Is there more to it, or not? Is it just stuff that's made up to teach us a lesson as a metaphor? So I've been drawn to that subject more and more over the years, and I've also been drawn to the subject of the end of the world, Armageddon, the apocalypse. And actually, apocalypse, it's a Greek term that simply just means a revelation. But a revelation of certain information can be the end of your world in certain aspects. I mean, I've come across information in my day, in my journey, that has shattered my understanding of how the world works. I mean, it's just been life-changing by hearing things, seeing things, experiencing things. So in some ways, I've experienced my own apocalypse from my own, old worldview.
Sure.
I'm all over the place right now. But going back to this, so my main question is this talk of Armageddon, or this talk of the end of the world. Here are my thoughts on it. A couple things. Is this something that is pending? Do we have these predictions that are being made, that have been made throughout time, that this is going to happen? Or have people had a remembrance of something that happened in the past, and it's burned in our collective unconscious or in our DNA? I mean, they're finding now that DNA is a fantastic memory storage, has memory storage capabilities that may store the memories of our ancestors that we just don't have the ability to consciously or willfully access at all times. So are we remembering something that has happened in the past to our people, or are we going to experience something like this? Or is it both? Did this happen before, and is it going to happen again? I don't know, but that's where I want to kind of start off with this. That's at least my driving interest in this, because I've felt this this pull towards that subject really my whole life. So
something you said was really interesting, and it was about you can have an apocalypse, a revelation that's life altering and maybe civilization altering. And I think a corollary to that would be that a society that doesn't have revelation, that loses the ability to have revelations, will face an Armageddon. So there's this guy named Nassim Taleb, and he looks back on the financial crash of 2008,
right?
And his takeaway from that was that we've lost the sense of how chaotic things can be. Like, we've lost a respect for uncertainty. So there were some people that were looking at all the weird, like, derivative trading and the housing bubble and the giving the loans to people that couldn't afford them. And we're like, this is unsustainable. But most people were deluded and were just like, no, we can control it, until everything fell apart.
Right.
So he brings a kind of mystic idea to like stock analysis. So he tells people if they're going to invest that they should invest in some things that are really they're really certain. But then they should also invest in some things that are like wild. And he calls it the barbell approach. So on one side you have like the really safe stuff, and on the other side you have the wild stuff. So and in the end, like, you can balance it out. Some of the wild speculative investments will fail, but other ones may. And so that's his strategy. And so I think that maybe some of the stories tap into some ancient wisdom that says that most things like have a life of their own. So we aren't necessarily masters of everything that we think we're masters of. And
absolutely
the human tendency to lapse into just complacency is a problem. And so maybe these stories are ways to like try to warn us that. And maybe human beings need like it to be way exaggerated and made dramatic in order to shake us out. So if you don't terrify us with extinction, we're not going to respond to like a stock market crash. Like so maybe there's some wisdom there that has a life of its own in our collective unconscious that is trying to alert us to the variables. There's so many variables in the things we do, and as we become more advanced and we try to control more things and we sprawl further across the globe and we become more interconnected with, like, Greece, like 50 years ago, if their economy collapsed, it wouldn't affect us. Now we're so connected that it could threaten the entire financial system, the worldwide financial system. So.
And some people are calling for that everything to just fall apart anyway.
Right.
You know, and that's what's scary is that stuff fear mongering, or are these people really foreseeing, and maybe not even in a prophetic way, maybe from an analytical standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have people with these analytical backgrounds that are claiming this, that that is a form of not an apocalypse, but an Armageddon, the end of the financial system, which then they say there's going to be chaos in the streets and looting and pillaging. And that's another thing, man. Every time you see this on TV, you see everybody in the street rioting, looting, raping, burning cities, all this stuff. So that's what people have come to expect. And and like the show Doomsday Preppers, I'm preparing for this, and everybody's got their weapons and they're battling. But I really wonder if instead the media would portray, wow, things ended. Now we're going to band together as a community. We're going to share resources. Yeah. We're going to learn how to farm and share our skills. I mean, that could happen too, because we survived for a long time without electricity, not too long ago here in the United States, So it doesn't have to be this crazy chaos. And I mean, I see opportunity if something like that were to happen for us to really find ourselves. But when you're focused on survival and you're focused on being afraid of your fellow man, and I'm afraid because he's afraid, because we've been both told that we're the enemy. That's how we've been divided. So if something happens, yes, now I'm afraid of this guy because we're both told that we're the enemy, And I think in some ways maybe Armageddon's being brought about by ourselves, because we as consumers, we keep watching that stuff, myself included. I love those disaster movies, I really do.
Maybe also subconsciously there are some powerful people who want to paint what you would see as, it wouldn't be totally positive. There would be birth pains, so to speak, and there'd be collateral damage. But maybe they have an interest in exaggerating it so that we won't make the changes ourselves that could make it so it wouldn't be as bad. So what do people in control like to do? They like to scare people. So they're like, if you don't give us your tax money and you don't continue cooperating with, the system the way it is right now, there's going to be chaos. So part of their narration, and I don't think it's necessarily conscious. That's one thing I'm very skeptical of, is that there's people like rubbing their hands like Dr. Evil going, but it's more of a subconscious thing. And there are, hey, there are think tanks and there are intelligent people, and you would know better than me, having worked in intelligence. There is some active stuff that goes on like that. Like, put out this disinformation. You know, information is the most powerful form of warfare, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Because,
and on a side note, we are seeing that in America. We've been seeing it for about 10 years. Somebody is definitely running an organized information or a psyop in the United States that's divided us against the police, against racial relationships, I mean, education, everything. That is a very clear psyop. They don't even have to fire a single shot because we're destroying ourselves. But go on. I'm sorry. I just had to say that.
No, I was just going to say, and then maybe part of that package is if you take these myths, which, and I addressed that earlier, I'm not saying, when I call it a myth, I'm not saying it doesn't have an element of truth. I'm just saying it's a story. It's a particular kind of story. It's an archetypal story.
Right.
And you take it, and it already exists, but maybe it's being manipulated in order to scare us into submission. So subconsciously we're like, because it happens to me all the time. I'm like, shit, what the hell would I do? Like I'm scared. Like, God forbid something happened to me. What would happen to my pets? You know what I mean? Like,
I've had that thought. My pets, my kids.
I can't even. I worry about moving because I need to make sure like it's amenable to my pets. So imagine like a worldwide catastrophe. Like, it's terrifying. It's not terrifying for me because I'm not afraid personally as much. I'm afraid for my daughter and I'm afraid for my animals.
That's it.
So
that's it right there.
So
that's how they get you.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go along with the system. I'm not going to, say certain things. I'm going to be careful about what I do. I'm going to make sure I show up for work on time. And I mean, I want to show up for work on time as it is. But if my motive is to just get along because I'm scared that if I'm not participating in the system the way it is, it's all going to fall apart, then I'm being motivated by fear.
Yes. And so, and that's tough. I mean, when like for me, my dogs were a motivator for me for a long time, and then I had kids, dude, and that is like, whoa, that really, it locks you in certain levels where it's like, all right, I really got to mind my P's and Q's now because other people's lives depend on me not getting myself in trouble. So it really is it is a motivating tool that people can use and do use against you. Show up for work, do your 9 to 5, punch your clock, pay your taxes. And if I don't, well, I go to jail, and now my kids suffer, and that sucks. And so that fear is a very easy tool for people to use, and I think that they are using that. And I think this fear and this talk, and the religious institutions are guilty of this too. Of talking about Armageddon and the end times. But you have to ask yourself, and I think that people have probably said this for the last 1,000 years. We are living in the end times. But at the same time, stuff looks really messed up right now. And we've talked about this before, though. Maybe stuff has always looked messed up, and maybe it's just now more readily available because of the internet and the instant communication we have. I don't know. I think society's always been pretty cruel, but I think that, we have a lot of elements in place right now that do look pretty bad. And I'm not saying this to be a monger. I don't like to do that. I'm not trying to scare anybody because I think that there are real solutions to these problems, but we need to take action right now. I talked about on my other show, they just put out, we are actually in our 6th mass extinction on the planet Earth, and it's at the hands of mankind. We are the cause of it. And they said there were species that normally take 800 to 10,000 years to go extinct have gone extinct in the last 100 years. That's wow. That's amazing. That's absolutely terrible. And but they said that if we change our ways, we can stop that extinction, because if this extinction continues, eventually it's going to affect us. It's going to affect our food chain. So is Armageddon, is the end upon us? Well, I think the end might be in sight. I think the end is probably always in sight, but I think it's a little closer than normal right now.
Well, that's interesting because on one hand, like that's what life is. Life is a
Mm-hmm.
series of beginning and ends. Like we're all mortal, at least for now,
Mm-hmm.
until they can, which I doubt they ever will. But until they can, create immortality, like through using like some kind of
Well, uploading computer
technology.
consciousness, they say that's coming.
Uh,
Uploading your consciousness into a computer, but
I'm skeptical, but no. So we've always had beginnings and endings, but
mm-hmm.
but at the same time, sometimes I wonder, and this is more of the skeptic in me. This is more of the coming from like a more materialist background. Sometimes I wonder about humans' need to inject order onto a chaotic universe. So on one hand,
Uh-huh.
you could say that and this is kind of what I was arguing earlier, that we don't respect chaos enough. But maybe on the other
Yes.
hand, we're so afraid of it that we have to make simple, incredibly simplistic stories, and that's like what you were saying about everybody thinks that their time is the end time, because that's kind of self-importance, because it gives you a sense that you're in a special
Yeah.
epoch, that you're
Mm-hmm.
living in a special time. So humans crave order and crave narrative. So maybe we're just superimposing, that narrative that we like onto a universe that probably will keep going. Now, whether it keeps going with us or not is a separate issue.
Right. Right. You're absolutely right. And that's an interesting way to look at that. Are we just creating this narrative to give us that feeling of self-importance? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's highly possible. I mean, because to feel insignificant is
Yeah.
a horrible, horrible thing. And I've gone through that in this journey when it's like, wow, and when I think when I first really started this journey, it started for me as like a rebellion against things that I had been taught, was
Sure.
when I realized just how small physically we were.
Yeah.
There's a video that's floating around Facebook now, but it shows the Earth, it shows all the planets in our solar system, it shows our sun, and then it shows like the next 10 sizes up of suns, and then they compare the biggest known star to the Earth, and dude, we are like a speck in
Mm.
comparison to that giant. So that is a humbling experience to understand that we are that insignificant, in all honesty. I mean, that's the equivalent of us looking at a tiny flea on our hand and just squishing it. It's the same thing. So when you realize that, you want to find some level of self-importance, I
Sure.
guess, and that's what people are doing. This is, like you said, this is an important era for me. But maybe I'm guilty of it, but I tend to think that there's something that's going on at this point. Otherwise, what's it all been for,
Well, at that point of feeling pointless, like
Mm-hmm.
you can, a lot of people can go to despair, or you can take that and the good aspects, the deeper aspects of spiritual and religious traditions, if you dig deeper outside the commercialized or the brand of religion that's put out there, like religion light, is you have these human beings contemplating that, and so you get to an abyss, and you can either like dive down into it and just give up, so to speak, or you can try to establish some meaning. You can try to find some meaning, knowing that it's not going to be this epic meaning necessarily, but it's going to be meaning nonetheless. And so that's why these stories are important, I think, because they're a way of trying to find meaning, and to try to, so we just talked about, we all agree that even if we are totally insignificant, our lives and the lives of the people we love aren't insignificant to us. So
Right.
if there are threats that we can manage and do something about, and these stories are there, and maybe there were past civilizations that made mistakes. Now maybe we can't go back and figure out what their mistakes were, but just the fact that there were civilizations, maybe we can take some wisdom from that and be like, well, we're not the first to do this, because if we believe we're the first civilization to ever do it, maybe it's easier to think that we're going to get it right.
You know, Joel, I said those exact words this morning. I was talking about these advanced, ancient civilizations this morning. Um, and if you look at a lot of the Native American cultures, they talk about how this is the fourth incarnation, the fifth incarnation. How they survived the great deluge, the great flood, or the destruction by fire. They went underground. The Hopi said they survived with the ant people who were underground. They all have these stories of how they survived. And you look at, I'm going to tie in exactly what you were saying, and the first thing that worries me is the genocide that's been committed against those people, against the Native American cultures and the indigenous populations, and how they've been labeled as savages, and how all their books and their writings and their artwork has been destroyed and discredited because it told these stories. I believe that those people are knowledge keepers. And, if we can, like you just said, if we can acknowledge, number one, this has happened before, I think that humbles us in understanding this can happen again. And that's a very important leap to make, because we have, I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance or just straight ignorance of, that's never going to happen in my lifetime. You're crazy. It was in a movie. I can't tell you how many times I hear that, and it's like, but no, this has happened in the past. And you don't even want to go to ancient history. Look at Nazi Germany. That was a disgrace. Look at Bosnia. Look at Rwanda. Like, these things do happen, and look at Japan. I could go on and on of the places where major cataclysms or war or violence has happened that have killed thousands and thousands and millions of people throughout our modern history. And on a global scale, this has happened before, and I think that we need to acknowledge that. This has happened. People, not everybody survived. What can we do about it? There are drastic changes we can make. I say alone in, the simple design of our homes.
Yes.
I've talked about the monolithic dome structures, which are a single unit made out of cement. It's a basic sphere that sits on the ground, and it's all one piece of cement. It's rated up to an F5 earthquake, or a 10.0 earthquake, an F5 tornado, the highest ranked hurricane. It handles everything because it's all one piece, so there's no moving parts that are going to break and crack. But yet you can't get approved by a bank for a traditional loan to build one because they're an unconventional residence. But these things save lives, and they're greener, they're energy efficient, they're, the whole conglomerate of things. But we're not willing to have that apocalypse, that revelation that, well, our way of life is really destroying us for the future. It's unsustainable. And to make that change would require a complete revolution of our entire system in order to do things differently and to do things better. And we don't want to do that because we don't want to do the work that's required to accept, well, I've been doing it wrong. I am culpable here. And the people in charge don't want to do that because they stand to lose a lot of money in future business. So, sorry, I'm just
No. I just thought of something, and how the church at one point believed the earth was the center of the universe. And
yeah, well, that's what they were putting out. I don't know if they believed it, but yes, that's what they were putting out, trying people from heresy who spoke against it.
Yeah, and it just dawned on me that we mock them for doing that, and it was wrong. It was totally wrong. But on one hand, people who claim to follow science will often talk about what you talked about, which is that we are just a speck in a huge universe. But since those times when the church's propaganda was disrupted, we don't think we're physically at the center of the universe, but we act morally as if we're the center of the universe, and more and more so.
And religion is I think in part to blame because we are God's chosen people.
Right.
Well, what makes us more special than the animal life on this planet? There's high intelligence among dolphins, whales, pigs, all these animals that are stuck in a coop. So if that's God's creation too, you think that's what God wanted for his creation?
I think in some ways that was a perversion of the original spiritual teachings.
I agree with you.
Because I really think that the idea that we were special wasn't meant to like, it was in a place. it was in place like your child might be special, but he's not allowed to do anything he wants.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, he's special, but he still has responsibilities, and you still have to teach him. So what was lost was a sense of humility, and see, because the church came along, and the church wanted to be that go-between between humans and God, and they became idols themselves.
Yes.
So they became the substitute, the surrogate for God, rather than trying to direct people to be humble. And I think a true sense of spiritual humility would have led people to more people. And still, despite the churches doing that, there's still, like, if you ever hear stories about St. Francis, and it could be mythology, but the mythology is telling in this respect. If you see a statue of St. Francis, often you see, like, little statues of animals.
Right. He was keeper of the animals.
Yeah, because there was something about his grace and his love that was like, even the animals were no longer afraid of him because he was so gentle. And the subtext of that narrative, of that myth about him, is that animals are important. Like, that animals do have value. And so we're more Earth-centric than we were back then. But that doesn't mean to say that the church, that we shouldn't have upended the lies about us being physically. But do you understand what I'm saying? Like people look back on that and say, well, look how dumb they were. They thought Earth was the center of the universe. But what difference does it make of now we're acting that way?
Right. We're acting right. And there's other things that we dismiss that are saying, oh, you're like you know, like the stuff that I talk about on my shows and on this show, you know, oh, no, there's no more to us than we realize. There's no, you know, ability for, let's say, telepathy or anything like that. Well, actually, science has now shown that there's an electromagnetic field that projects information, just like a radio or a Wi-Fi signal. But people say, oh, that's crazy, that's impossible. So we're still in that same paradigm. We accept a little bit and then reject everything else that doesn't fit the new accepted. It's like the Cecil the Lion thing. That's trendy now. Everybody's like, oh, let's go after this guy. He sucks. Well,
I saw what you put about that, and that was so dead on.
Thank you. You know, I'm frustrated with these people that are, all of you out there that are guilty of this. You know, pick a cause, research it, investigate it, and do something about it. And stop just being these internet advocates who want to get upset about something, but at the same time, I bet you went and got McDonald's. Well, look what happens to those animals.
I'm sorry. I think that I admire the people's compassion for Cecil, but at the same time, that's hypocrisy. So in other words, they can be compassionate, but you can be a compassionate hypocrite. Me calling them a hypocrite doesn't dismiss their good intentions. It doesn't make them bad people. But their behavior is hypocritical.
And it's, you know, Joel, it's frustrating me more and more as I'm sitting back and watching trends and watching, you know, and Bill Cooper said it. You know, I know Alex Jones talks about it, and I hate to use this term because I don't want to be condescending to people, but to sheeple, it's like, look at this bright light over here, and everybody runs over to that bright light. Now, oh, look over here, and everybody runs over to there, you know, and that's what's happening. You're being led here, you're being led here, and along the way, you're being herded to this team, and you're being herded to that team, and you're being further and further divided. And again, what's going to happen? The apocalypse is going to hit, and everybody's going to fight.
But what's so amazing about that, and this is a hopeful note, is that those people mean well.
Yes.
And that's why I said that. I was careful to say that I admire the compassion.
And I agree with you.
Because their good intentions are being used against them.
And that's the key, though, is that, you know, it's because we have forgotten how to look within ourselves and understand our own emotional needs. So when we're shown something that triggers an emotion, we act on it as a knee-jerk reaction. And that's the problem, is that we're not used to our feelings of that level. We're not used to our emotions.
We don't know where to put them.
Right. We you know, it's not accepted. It's not manly to have emotions. We're in a masculine, you know, a patriarchal society right now.
Exactly.
So when we're faced with those emotions, we need to address this right now because I'm not supposed to feel this and I want to feel better right now. No, sit and understand why you're feeling this way. And where did this come from? You know, and we don't want to do that anymore. And I challenge you to start to, I say all the time, pay attention to your feelings and your thoughts and why are you having them and how can you almost control them. You know, not saying I don't want to feel sad today, but I'm saying recognize when they're coming on. And then when media throws this stuff at you, because conspiracy theorist or not, that's what's happening. You're being played. Just look at politics. You're being played and swayed and misled. There's more than just politics that are going on here. And I won't go into what I talk about in my book here, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. And this is, to me, more proof that, hey, you're being led to, you're being distracted from other issues, and it just shows that you're not, I don't know. I'm frustrated with it, Joel. I admire people for standing up for it. And I'm glad this guy is, kind of been discredited and outed, but he's one cause among 50,000. What makes this one more special than any other cause that's been out there that you have ignored over your past lifetime?
Well, it just dawned on me, and I'm trying to think of a spatial image I could give to you and to the listeners. But it's like I've gotten caught up in the religion versus science thing. And reality is, if you plotted them on scales, you would have, say you have a piece of paper and you have a scale like going and draw a line across the piece of paper. So we're told that science is on one side and church is on the other. But reality, what the image that just came to my head, like listening to you talk about how now we have ways to ritualize. We have artificial rituals to channel these beautiful natural human emotions like empathy for a lion. And reality, what I saw is that the church and science as institutions in the last 500 years, on that piece of paper, they'd be next to each other. They have more in common than they have difference. It just, their appearances are different. So back then, and this is what you faced as a young person from reading you saw that the rituals that and see, I didn't grow up in that. So sometimes I can be too easily defend, say, the Catholics. Now, sometimes a lot of, like, sometimes they're painted with too much of a broad brush, because Catholics have done tremendous charity, and even the first abolitionists were Catholics. They were excommunicated by the larger Catholic Church. But
it said in Angels and Demons or the Da Vinci Code, he says, my religion gives comfort to the sick and dying and clothes to the hungry. What has your lack of faith done? So yes, there is good that comes out of this. I agree completely.
But my point is that they're empty rituals. It's just empty. I don't say they're not totally empty. That's not fair. But they're not full. They're not.
Most people don't have that connection to it.
They're not as powerful of rituals as they could be. So they're just easy. So the Catholics came along, and the Christians, or whatever you want to call them, back 600 years ago, they were all Catholics in terms of Christians before the Reformation. But they set up a way, just like we have today, where if people were feeling something, they had like a ready-made way to go deal with it.
Right.
But it wasn't a radical, like, transformative experience. It was a way to do these things and feel these things within the confines of a system, of a structure. Back then it was feudalism. Today it's modern mixed economy capitalism / socialism.
And what that does, if you study the human body's connection to chi, to Reiki, to life force, to prana, to the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It's that emotional intent and that feeling that resonates through your heart.
Yep.
Not the metaphorical, like your heart chakra. That can be measured. That has been measured. There's a bio.
No, it's literal. I totally agree with you. It's literal.
Right. And science has shown this. The Institute of Heart Math has done studies on this, among other researchers. When you're doing a pre-prepared prayer, there's no connection to it anymore. You're just saying the words. Yeah. It's, and now if you're having your own thoughts and emotions behind those words, then that's great. But that's the danger of ritual and routine. They're great because they give us maybe a starting point. But
a sketch.
That's the problem right, exactly. But that's part of the problem with prayer is I'm just saying this prayer, you're not putting the intent, and it's
I totally agree with you.
That is your connection to everything else. So most people who pray don't understand that, and they're not doing that. They don't have that connection to the greater universe out there. And it's not new agey. I say all the time, this is more sciencey now from the stuff that I've read and listened to. I may not be able to articulate it as well as some of the people that are much smarter than me, but I know enough to know, yes, this is it.
Well, what I see is that it, like, what you're talking about is, like, the ancients believed in it. It was like they believed the world was full of magic, and
Yes.
and songs were magic, and words could be magic. You spell letters. That's not a coincidence. I've said that on other shows, and I'm not the first one to come up with that. That's been said by other people. But, like, literally writing stuff down was like a sacred act, and so. And the church in the modern, or the starting in the Dark Ages church, demystified. That's the irony of it, because we look at them as being superstitious and mystical, but in reality, I think in a lot of ways they demystified the world, because they just created these lanes for, like you said, for the sheep to go in.
Right, and they took in essence, they took our power away by making us give it to a god, by saying, ask God for this. God's the one that's going to decide if you get this or if you don't get this. Be afraid of God, and as the line goes,
actually be afraid of us.
Yeah, in reality, we're more co-creators, and I'm not saying that we are quote unquote God, but we have a real, I think it's more like the movie Avatar, how we were initially designed. I think that design has been changed or influenced or manipulated to now where we've forgotten how to use this connection that we have. But we do have the power to have influence. Like I said, I spoke about last week the Maharishi effect, which was a study done of over 700 participants where they engaged in meditation on peace in certain certain war-driven areas, to include Lebanon and Libya and I forget where else. And what they found was, depending on what they were doing, 17% decrease in violent acts in areas they were working on, and like during the time that they were meditating. Some spots it was up to, I think, 90% decrease in terrorist activity, bombings, all this. I mean, they got these crazy results that they repeated several times doing it, showing that, hey, a small amount of people holding the correct intent can influence that electromagnetic soup that's out there that resonates with people. And again, that's mob mentality. You think of a tuning fork. You hit one, and if you resonate, if you're the same frequency or the same pitch, both forks are going to vibrate. If it's not, it creates that disharmony. And we are receptors just like that. I'm going off. I could go on forever. I'm not going on right now. But this stuff all ties in.
Well, I think to bring it right back full circle, I mean, in many ways, like, the story is still being written. And Greg Braden talked about that. Greg Braden talked about, and I take it with a grain of salt, but once again, see, I don't put stories into false or true categories as easily.
Right.
Because I understand that we're humans and we need our stories, and there's more of a gray area. But he talked about how that, there's many possible ways that things could have happened, and there are many possible ways that they can still happen. And actually, they might be happening in another way, in another incarnation, so to speak. And so I think that we are co-creating, we're going to co-create, an apocalypse. And what that is going to be, whether it's going to be the end of mankind or humankind, or if it's going to be a flourishing of a new age, or if it's going to be something somewhere in the middle. I think more likely it'll be something in the middle where there is suffering and there is pain. But there are better things lying ahead. But we're going to help write that, and we're helping it write it with where we put our energy and where we put our stories.
And that's I'm sorry, we're running out of time, but I think that's a great, almost a closing point. I love Greg Braden, what he talks about, and I was completely hopeless and full of despair until I caught, and I think they've since taken the video down, one of his workshops where he explained all of this stuff and how, it resonated with experiences that I've had in life, and it just had everything click and fall into place, where at the end of the day I walked out of there going, we're not helpless. We're not hopeless. There is a lot that we can do. We do have a lot of power. We've just never been shown how to use it, or we've been told that we're not able to use it. And I think that the reason why we see all this fear stuff on the TV is because then we start saying, oh my gosh, this is coming, I need to prepare for this. Now our intent is, I need to prepare for the bad things happening. Right. It's defensive.
It's reactive.
Right. And if we have the power to create, when you have that, when you're putting that energy into I'm bracing for impact, well, you're helping to create that impact to manifest.
Absolutely.
As opposed to if you're saying, there's a better way. Small changes have massive impacts. I'm changing things. I'm doing all these things. That's what you're going to manifest. We need more people to get online with that. And like I said, you don't have to fight anything. You just need to do things differently. And it starts with looking within and changing your thoughts. It starts by paying attention to your thoughts, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that Greg Brady piece is a great way to kind of wrap up this show, where I think we're just over an hour right now, you know, and look it up. Go to the my Truth Seekers YouTube page, TruthSeik. I think it's Truth Seeker, Ker. You know, look it up, and I have a consciousness playlist on there, and there should be some Greg Braden stuff in there, some other stuff that's going to, if this is new to you, it's going to blow your mind. And that is the revolution. It really is. So, Joel, let me kick it back to you for final thoughts. I know we could go on the rest of the night. I feel like we got a good energy tonight, as always. But
when you were talking about the fear and responding to the fear, I thought about the idea that when you're afraid, you ball up. Often people will go into the fetal position, and that literally causes a closed energy system, a closed loop. Whereas if you have your arms open, what do? You tend to embrace, and you are an open energy loop. So you're sinking in. So to be open, and I'm not saying be open for anything, because if you're open for anything, you will stand for nothing. But I'm saying, I think, like, what was great about the show was that we tried to examine these things from a variety of positions, being open and not just falling into the old stories, like either it's literally true and Jesus is coming, which even as a Christian I have serious problems with, but on the other hand, that'll never happen, we'll be fine, that's all just a bunch of nonsense and fairy tales. When in reality, we have to be open to all that. And just to be open in our, like you said, when we're open to the energy that's out there, I mean, amazing things can happen. But we're scared and we don't know, so we fall into the rhythms and to the rituals that we're taught. And who can blame us?
It's comfortable.
Who can blame us? But that's where, like, I think me and you, despite we don't have a great audience yet, but I think we can give ourselves some credit in that we're not accepting. I refuse to accept just the standard model of anything. I'm not just going to fall into any old, this is what it is.
I agree with you.
I gotta keep searching. I got to. I mean,
on the Secret podcast that I do every morning, I end every show by saying, never stop questioning and keep an open mind. And I think that's of the utmost importance. Even things that you hold as true and you accept and you believe, pick it apart one day, question it. Keep asking why until you get to the source. You're going to be surprised at what you find. Just like a little kid, why?
And how can it hurt? Because even if you come back to your original position, you're going to understand that position.
And give you more strength in that. And one more thing, and we really got to go ahead and close out this show. You talked about how, when you're afraid, you're balled up, and when you're relaxed and comfortable, you're open for the embrace. I don't know if it was in Ray Davis's book, Anunnaki Awakening, or the Graham Hancock book. I think it was in the Graham Hancock's book, Supernatural, that I'm reading right now. Somebody was talking about the science of DNA, how when we are afraid, the DNA actually becomes restrictive. But when we're experiencing more of a love type of emotion, it's more open to transmit and receive. I mean, there's science behind this.
I believe that.
So it's a fascinating. Science is stranger than fiction. Fact is stranger than fiction, I guess, is how the saying goes now. But to those of you out there that listen to the show, that you're interested in it, and you feel that pull, that something's not right, go with it. That's your intuition. That's your connection. The more you use it, the more you follow it, the more you'll know how to use it, the more incredible places it will lead you inside and out. So let's keep that up, keep that journey going. Joe, I'm going to go ahead and close out the show if it's okay with you.
I just want to say one last thing. As I'm sitting here, it's hot, and it's hot. I don't have air conditioning downstairs, and this marvelous breeze just came blowing through the window as we were talking about being open.
And that's it right there. I say all the time, we always ask for signs, and we expect the signs to be in our native language, but nature in the universe doesn't speak English. It speaks in signs and symbols and actions. And if you're open to them, you will be able to start to understand and interpret them. They are real. They are there. I've listened to them. I've followed them, and they've led me to so many great, great places in my life. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the show now. Thank you to our listeners. Check us out, serviceofchange.com. Support us, serviceofchange.com/bookstore. And listen to us. We are on the air 24/7 with the Seeker podcast in the mornings from 9 to 3. And we have Changecasts playing on a loop from 3 to 9 every single day. This edition and all new Changecasts will play, I believe, from 6 to 9, Monday through Friday. Check the website to be sure. I don't have the times in front of me. But many opportunities to listen. Get the mobile app for free at serviceofchange.com. Click the banner at the top and just save it to your home screen, and you can listen 24/7 on Service of Change Radio. Great things are happening there. We're getting the word out. Please help us spread the word by promoting it and sharing our links. I want to say thank you to Joel for being my philosopher of Facebook, esteemed co-host. It's been a great show tonight. I'm Dennis Nappy II with Service of Change, where small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. Be that change. Thank you.